The Entertainment Tonight studio buzzed with anticipation as Tommy Lee arrived, his reputation for unpredictability adding an edge to the atmosphere. Cameras rolled, lights flared, and the host welcomed him with a practiced smile. At first, the exchange felt playful, almost nostalgic, as they referenced Tommy's legendary career and wild past. Yet beneath the surface, there was tension, the kind that hinted this interview might not follow the usual polished script viewers expected from a mainstream entertainment show. Tommy leaned back in his chair, relaxed but alert, answering early questions with sarcasm and humor. The audience laughed, and producers likely felt relieved. However, the tone shifted when the host brought up recent controversies tied to Tommy's outspoken opinions. His smile faded slightly, replaced by a sharper gaze. It was clear that this was not a topic he had come prepared to revisit, especially in a setting designed for quick sound bites rather than nuanced conversation. As the questions continued, the host pressed harder, framing the controversy as public concern rather than personal critique. Tommy interrupted, pushing back against what he felt was a misrepresentation. His voice remained controlled, but the edge was unmistakable. The exchange grew tense, with each response revealing growing frustration. The studio audience quieted, sensing that the interview was veering off its planned course. Tommy accused the show of prioritizing headlines over honesty, arguing that his words had been taken out of context. The host attempted to redirect, insisting the questions reflected what fans wanted to know. That justification only fueled Tommy's irritation. He gestured sharply, emphasizing that his career had been defined by music, not controversy. The clash of perspectives created an uncomfortable silence that lingered longer than usual for live television. Producers likely signaled for calm, but the energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. Tommy leaned forward, his posture confrontational now, and demanded clarity about the intent behind the questions. The host maintained composure, yet their tone grew defensive. What began as an interview was now a confrontation, unfolding in real time before millions of viewers. The conversation escalated when the host referenced Tommy's past behavior, suggesting a pattern. That comment struck a nerve. Tommy's response was immediate and fiery, rejecting the idea that his past defined his present. He spoke about growth, accountability, and the exhaustion of being constantly reduced to old headlines. His words were passionate, resonating with some audience members while unsettling others. The host attempted to interject, but Tommy continued, clearly feeling unheard. His voice rose slightly, not in anger but in insistence. He criticized the entertainment industry for exploiting chaos while ignoring substance. The cameras captured every expression, every pause, amplifying the intensity of the moment. It was no longer just an interview, it was a statement. A producer stepped onto view, subtly signaling a commercial break. The host acknowledged it, but Tommy shook his head, refusing to pause. He questioned why conversations like this were always cut short when they became uncomfortable. That refusal marked a turning point. The control of the show was slipping, and the tension became impossible to contain. Security personnel hovered just outside the frame as Tommy stood up. The movement startled the audience. He pointed toward the host, not aggressively, but with emphasis, reiterating that respect should be mutual. The host responded firmly, reminding him of the show's format and time constraints. The exchange felt less like dialogue and more like a standoff. Tommy took a deep breath, then laughed bitterly, saying this was exactly why he avoided such platforms. The laughter didn't tease the tension, it sharpened it. He accused the show of staging confrontations for ratings. The host denied the claim, but the denial only deepened the divide between them. At that moment, a producer approached Tommy directly, whispering something off mic. Tommy listened briefly, then shook his head again. He turned back toward the cameras and declared that he was done playing along. The audience gasped, realizing the interview was collapsing before their eyes. Security stepped in more visibly now, positioning themselves between Tommy and the set. The host attempted to salvage the situation, thanking Tommy for coming. Tommy scoffed, saying he hadn't been invited for conversation but for conflict. The words hung heavy in the studio air. As security escorted him toward the exit, Tommy continued speaking, projecting his voice so it carried. He told viewers to question what they watch and why. His message cut through the chaos, reframing the moment as more than just celebrity drama. The cameras followed until producers finally cut away. The studio erupted in murmurs once Tommy disappeared backstage. The host turned back to the camera, visibly shaken but professional, apologizing to viewers for the disruption. The apology felt necessary, yet incomplete, as the incident had already etched itself into live television history. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation spread across social media. Fans debated whether Tommy had been provoked or crossed the line. Hashtags trended, and opinions polarized instantly. Some praised his refusal to be boxed in, while others criticized his inability to stay composed. Entertainment analysts dissected the footage frame by frame, analyzing body language and tone. Many noted how quickly the situation escalated once sensitive topics emerged. The incident became a case study in live TV unpredictability and the risks of pushing guests beyond their comfort zones. Fellow musicians weighed in, some expressing solidarity with Tommy's frustration. They spoke about media manipulation and the pressure to perform personalities rather than present realities. The conversation expanded beyond one show, touching on broader issues within celebrity interviews. Entertainment Tonight released a brief statement later that day, emphasizing their commitment to respectful dialogue. They acknowledged the situation but stood by their editorial choices. The neutrality of the statement did little to quiet public debate, which continued to intensify online. Tommy, meanwhile, posted a message to his fans thanking them for support. He reiterated that his reaction came from feeling misrepresented. The message was calmer than the confrontation itself, suggesting reflection rather than regret. Fans responded with messages of encouragement and understanding. Media critics noted that being kicked off a show carries a stigma, yet in this case, it also reinforced Tommy's rebellious image. For some, the incident reaffirmed why he remained a compelling figure decades into his career. For others, it highlighted the cost of unresolved tension with the media. The host addressed the incident again in a later broadcast, clarifying intentions and expressing respect for Tommy's legacy. While the tone was conciliatory, the damage had already been done. The moment lived on independently of any explanation. Viewers began questioning the ethics of confrontational interviews, especially when designed for viral impact. Tommy's confrontation became part of a larger critique of sensationalism in entertainment journalism. The debate shifted from personalities to practices. Over time, the incident was referenced whenever interviews turned tense. Another Tommy Lee moment became shorthand for unexpected blow-ups. That cultural imprint ensured the confrontation would not be forgotten anytime soon. Despite the controversy, Tommy continued touring and appearing publicly, greeted by fans with renewed enthusiasm. The confrontation seemed to energize his base, reinforcing his image as unapologetically himself. His career moved forward, unaffected by the temporary storm. Industry insiders quietly admitted that the incident served as a reminder of live TV's volatility. No amount of preparation can fully control a guest unwilling to conform. That unpredictability remains both the risk and the allure of unscripted entertainment. As weeks passed, the outrage softened into reflection. Some viewers admitted they initially sided against Tommy but later reconsidered after watching the full exchange. Context, many realized, mattered more than headlines. The confrontation also sparked conversations about mental health and boundaries. Public figures, critics argued, are often expected to absorb provocation without reaction. Tommy's refusal challenged that expectation, even if imperfectly expressed. In retrospect, the moment symbolized a clash between control and autonomy. Entertainment Tonight represented structure and format, while Tommy embodied resistance to being shaped by it. Neither side fully won, but both revealed something important. The incident remains a reminder that live television is a human space, not a flawless machine. Emotions, histories, and misunderstandings collide under bright lights. When they do, the results can be uncomfortable, revealing, and unforgettable. What began as a routine promotional interview ended as a defining confrontation. Tommy Lee being kicked off Entertainment Tonight was more than a headline. It was a snapshot of tension between celebrity and media, captured in real time and destined to echo far beyond the studio walls. In the days that followed, entertainment blogs continued to revisit the confrontation, each adding new angles and interpretations. Some focused on the production choices, questioning why sensitive topics were introduced without clearer framing. Others highlighted Tommy's history with the media, arguing that long-standing mistrust made the clash almost inevitable. The incident became less about one argument and more about the fragile relationships between outspoken artists and tightly controlled television formats. Fans began sharing older interviews of Tommy where similar tensions had surfaced, suggesting a pattern of friction when narratives felt imposed on him. These clips gained traction, fueling arguments that the Entertainment Tonight moment was not isolated but part of a broader struggle over image control. For supporters, this reinforced the idea that Tommy's reaction stemmed from accumulated frustration rather than impulsive anger. Critics, however, emphasized professionalism, arguing that agreeing to an interview comes with accepting difficult questions. They viewed the confrontation as a missed opportunity for dialogue. This divide kept discussions alive, as both sides presented compelling points. The complexity of the situation resisted simple judgment, making it a recurring topic in opinion columns and talk panels. Media trainers weighed in, explaining how live interviews rely heavily on trust. When that trust breaks, escalation can happen quickly. They pointed out subtle cues in the footage where de-escalation might have been possible, suggesting lessons for both hosts and guests. Tommy's walkout thus became instructional material in broadcasting circles. Meanwhile, Entertainment Tonight quietly adjusted its promotional strategy, emphasizing lighter segments in subsequent episodes. While never officially linked to the incident, the shift did not go unnoticed by regular viewers. It hinted at internal reflection, even as public statements remained carefully neutral. Tommy's bandmates and collaborators avoided direct commentary, but their continued association signaled solidarity. Appearances went on as scheduled, and crowds responded enthusiastically. The absence of backlash at live shows suggested that fans separated the confrontation from his artistry, reinforcing his enduring appeal. Online forums buzzed with speculation about what was said off-camera. Unverified accounts claimed heated exchanges backstage, while others suggested calm conversations took place once cameras stopped rolling. The lack of confirmed details only added to the mystique, allowing the story to evolve through rumor and imagination. Over time, the phrase "kicked off" itself was debated. Some argued Tommy chose to leave rather than being forcibly removed, reframing the narrative from punishment to refusal. This semantic distinction mattered to fans, who saw agency as the core issue. Language, they argued, shaped perception as much as footage. Cultural commentators connected the moment to a wider trend of celebrities resisting scripted vulnerability. They noted how audiences increasingly question authenticity when emotions are prompted rather than volunteered. Tommy's confrontation fit into this shift, even if delivered through conflict rather than calm explanation. The host eventually moved on to new interviews, but occasional references to respecting guests hinted at lessons learned. Viewers noticed a slightly more cautious tone when controversial topics arose. These subtle changes suggested growth without reopening old wounds publicly. For aspiring musicians watching, the incident served as both warning and inspiration. It highlighted the risks of mainstream exposure while affirming the importance of staying true to oneself. Many discussed how they would handle similar situations, turning the confrontation into a hypothetical exercise in self-advocacy. Months later, the clip resurfaced whenever discussions about media ethics trended. It had become shorthand for what happens when conversations cross from curiosity into provocation. Its longevity proved that the moment tapped into deeper anxieties about control, consent, and representation. Tommy himself rarely referenced the incident afterward. His silence contrasted sharply with the noise surrounding it, allowing interpretations to settle organically. By not reigniting the debate, he avoided being trapped in the very cycle he criticized. Looking back, the confrontation marked a moment of exposure for the machinery of entertainment news. Viewers glimpsed the tension between storytelling and sensationalism, between format and freedom. That exposure lingered longer than any single soundbite. Ultimately, the incident endured because it felt unscripted and unresolved. There was no tidy conclusion, only reflection. Tommy Lee being kicked off Entertainment Tonight became less about a fiery confrontation and more about a collision of expectations. leaving behind questions that continue to resonate whenever cameras roll and microphones turn on. As the weeks rolled on, the confrontation slowly transitioned from headline news to a reference point in broader conversations about celebrity autonomy. Commentators began using Tommy Lee's moment as an example of what happens when personal identity clashes with packaged narratives. The story no longer needed constant updates. It had become symbolic, representing resistance to being shaped by editorial agendas rather than authentic dialogue. Viewers who initially reacted with shock began revisiting the full clip rather than short snippets. Watching the exchange in context led some to reconsider their opinions. What once seemed like an outburst appeared more like a buildup of frustration. This shift showed how quickly perception can change when audiences move beyond viral fragments and seek the full story. Media psychology experts discussed how live television amplifies emotion, turning minor disagreements into major moments. They noted how lighting, pacing, and audience silence all contributed to the intensity. Tommy's confrontation illustrated how these elements can escalate tension, reminding viewers that what feels explosive on screen may be the product of many invisible pressures. Fans also compared this incident to other celebrity walkouts, drawing parallels and contrasts. Unlike dramatic exits filled with shouting, Tommy's confrontation was fueled by accusation and defense. That distinction mattered, as it reframed the moment as a clash of principles rather than pure anger. The nuance kept discussions alive long after the initial outrage faded. Entertainment journalism courses began citing the moment as an example of crisis management gone awry. Students analyzed what questions triggered the shift and how responses shaped the outcome. Tommy Lee's exit became instructional, not sensational, reinforcing the idea that even chaotic moments can offer valuable lessons. Meanwhile, Tommy's public appearances carried a renewed edge. Interviews on alternative platforms felt more controlled, more deliberate. Fans noticed how he spoke openly when trust was established, reinforcing his claim that context mattered. The Entertainment Tonight clash stood out as an exception rather than a rule. The network's silence after initial statements also became part of the narrative. By not continuously addressing the issue, they allowed it to settle naturally. Some interpreted this as avoidance, others as professionalism. Either way, the absence of escalation prevented the story from spiraling further. Online creators produced long-form analyses, breaking down tone, posture, and pacing. These videos gained significant traction, proving audiences were hungry for deeper understanding rather than surface drama. Tommy's confrontation thus fueled a secondary wave of content focused on media literacy. The phrase "fiery confrontation" remained attached to the incident, but its meaning softened over time. What once suggested chaos came to represent friction between expectation and reality. That evolution in language mirrored how the public gradually reframed the event. For longtime fans, the moment reinforced why Tommy Lee had always been polarizing. He resisted conformity, even when it cost him comfort or approval. That consistency, whether admired or criticized, was seen as authenticity rather than volatility. The incident also highlighted how little room live TV leaves for recalibration. Once momentum builds, there is rarely space to reset. Tommy's refusal to pause exposed that limitation, showing how quickly control can slip away despite professional preparation. Commentators eventually noted that no lasting damage followed for either side. Entertainment Tonight continued its broadcasts, and Tommy continued his career. The lack of fallout suggested that such confrontations, while intense, are often temporary disruptions rather than career-defining disasters. Over time, the confrontation became less about blame and more about awareness. It reminded viewers that entertainment media is a negotiation, not a one-sided performance. When that negotiation breaks down, moments like this emerge. Fans still reference the incident when discussing honesty in interviews. It serves as a reminder that authenticity cannot be forced and that resistance may surface when it is. Tommy's reaction, imperfect as it was, underscored that truth. In the end, Tommy Lee being kicked off Entertainment Tonight remains a snapshot of live television's raw unpredictability. It captured a moment where expectation collided with reality, leaving behind not just a viral clip, but an enduring conversation about control, respect, and the human limits behind the spotlight. Even long after the confrontation faded from daily news cycles, it continued to surface in discussions about authenticity in celebrity culture. People referenced it as an example of what happens when public figures refuse to play along with pre-written narratives. The moment lingered because it felt unscripted and real, cutting through the usual polish that dominates entertainment television. Some fans argued that the incident revealed more about the pressures of fame than about Tommy Lee himself. Being constantly questioned about controversy can harden anyone over time. From this perspective, the confrontation was less an explosion and more a crack in a system that thrives on tension, conflict, and emotionally charged moments. The role of the audience also came under scrutiny. Viewers questioned their own expectations, asking whether they subconsciously reward confrontations by sharing clips and fueling algorithms. Tommy's exit forced people to confront their participation in turning discomfort into entertainment, a realization that made the moment linger uncomfortably in public memory. Music journalists began framing the incident alongside Tommy's artistic legacy rather than separating the two. They argued that his confrontational streak had always been part of his persona, woven into his music and public image. Seen this way, the Entertainment Tonight clash felt less like a deviation and more like a continuation of a lifelong resistance to control. Over time, the sharp edges of the debate softened, replaced by a more reflective tone. Fewer people argued about who was right or wrong, and more discussed what could be learned. That shift marked the transition of the incident from scandal to case study, a rare evolution in the fast-moving entertainment world. For aspiring journalists and hosts, the confrontation became a cautionary tale. It highlighted the importance of listening as much as questioning, and of recognizing when a conversation is becoming adversarial rather than informative. Tommy's reaction underscored how quickly trust can collapse under pressure. The incident also underscored the limits of live broadcasting. No editing, no second takes, no chance to soften the edges. What viewers saw was raw and immediate, a reminder that despite rehearsals and planning, live television remains unpredictable and deeply human. Fans continued to revisit the clip not out of outrage, but curiosity. Each rewatch revealed new nuances, small pauses and shifts in tone that hinted at how close the interview was to breaking long before it actually did. Those details kept the moment alive in collective memory. In hindsight, the confrontation seemed inevitable in a media environment increasingly driven by extremes. Calm conversations rarely trend, but conflict does. Tommy Lee's removal from the show exposed that imbalance, forcing a brief pause in the relentless chase for viral moments. Ultimately, the story endures because it captured a collision rather than a conclusion. There was no clear winner, no final statement to settle the matter. Instead, it left behind an open-ended reflection on fame, media, and personal boundaries, ensuring that the moment remains relevant whenever conversations about celebrity interviews resurface.